Wolverine. It literally sounded like this is me hearing the guy on the trailer and then on the first couple episodes and further into the show as well. It literally sounded like someone that they had wheeled out of a nursing home.
Jeez, Dad, keep buzzing in my ear. What would we do if we ever lost you?
Put in front of a microphone playing this part of Wolverine. But to me, it sounded bad. I mean, it sounded like Old Man River playing Wolverine. It was almost distracting to me. There were some moments that it sounded like he had those things in his nose and then maybe even a catheter in.
Only the pain that a catheter can bring.
X-Men 97 just recently released to great fanfare and for good reason. As someone who enjoyed the animated series when they were a kid and then recently tried to revisit and thought it was super cheesy and very dated, when I watched this show, I was very, very impressed. I must say, me personally, animated projects are in my mind, and a lot of people don't think this way, and that's okay. But in my mind, animated projects can only get so high on my rankings list. I will never compare, as far as the live action movies, I will never compare Spider-Man Into the Multiverse, or I'm sorry, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and those films with the live action MCU films. They just don't hold the same weight to me if they're animated. With all that being said, the themes that were tackled here, how good the story actually was so impressive. There was only one episode that I was thinking like, we're getting back to that old 90s X-Men. It was the first half of that Mojo episode, which was really weird and just, but then the other half, they redeemed themselves with the Storm story. So yeah, nothing but good things from me. What did you guys think? I know Jared, I can't wait to hear what Jared's, because Jared is a huge X-Men animated series fan.
Yes. Those are my children. I don't have children of my own, but I've got some genetic freaks in Westchester County, New York, that I call my children, and those are the X-Men. Those are my babies. I remember when they announced that this was going to come out, I was at Comic-Con in Grand Rapids, and I just lost it. I just lost my stuff because I could not believe they were going to bring my childhood back. I love this show. It debuted Wednesdays at 3 a.m. here on the East Coast, and I was up by 5 every Wednesday morning. I didn't sleep every Wednesday. For the past 11 Wednesdays, I've not slept. I'm just so jacked. It was a mix of the childhood wonderful greatness combined with comic book stories, my favorite characters, updated animation, a budget. The first show didn't really have as much of a budget. Saban was notorious penny pincher. In fact, season 2, the way that he thanked his writers was by giving them $500 less for every script that they turned in after X-Men was a hit.
You got to pay for that Power Rangers.
They were both at the same time. He was just wiping his butt with money. Like, he had so much money. I digress. This was just a love letter to the fans is what I thought. I could tell that Bo DiMaio, great last name, by the way, loved the series. And you could tell that he loved the books. He loved the animated series. It had been 30 years since the last show was out. Those of us that have been alive those 30 years, we all went through these things like September 11th, which was kind of our Genosha. We all have we're in relationships now. We're not all, 8 and 10 years old. And you could see like this was the X-Men for all of us that had lived life the past 30 years.
The exact details of why they fired Bo DiMaio have not come out. The only thing that we know, the general public, is that he did have an OnlyFans account, but it's got to be something else, right? It's got to be something more than that. But yes, I will agree with you, Jared. And at this point, unless he did something really, really awful, which I don't think he would because he's not in court, he's not going to jail, let the man come back. He did such an excellent job on this show. Like you said, you can tell that he just lived and breathed this property.
Man, my ringtone has been that X-Men theme for years. Obviously, it came out, 92 is whenever the original shot. I was born in 92, so I didn't watch that until later on the end of it. But I remember loving it as a kid. The Sega video game that was out was my big part of that, where I loved it, man. Watching the show again reminded me why I love Nightcrawler so much, and why I love Gambit so much, and why I love Rogue so much, just all of them. And earlier you said, you don't really compare them to a live action version because it's animated. And I can understand that, but I feel like in an animated series, you can get so much more development, and you can have so many like cooler scenes just because it can all be animated. You're not working around like physical restraints of people and the way they move. And whenever you film it live action, even if it's, mocap, it's hard because the human body moves in certain ways, and you can just defy all of that in animation. And I love it because you can just get so much good content out of it. Like I really like anime for the most part. It plays into that for me. And I guess when I viewed it more of an anime than I did as a cartoon. Like Jared said, it was definitely directed at us who are adults now, who have lived life, and we're going through some of these things and seen more of life. I loved it, man. It was wonderful for me. I thought it was great. Again, it like rekindled like that fire of my childhood of like watching that stuff and like my joy. I remember thinking so many times, this is why I love superhero stuff. Like this right here is why I love superhero everything.
I enjoyed what I saw of it. I did not get to finish all of it. However, I will say that original cartoon was super, super important in my love of actually reading comics. Because you got to understand, like, my mom and dad were not the parents that take me to the comic book store every Wednesday and get new pulls. However, Marvel's animation department at that time on Fox, I got to watch Days of Future Past, like a book that I would later go on to read. So like X-Men weren't necessarily a book that I was like really, I was mostly a Batman Spider-Man guy. The X-Men animated series like led me to read a lot of really good comics. And from what I've seen, I'm 7 episodes in. It's perfect. It doesn't feel like a rehashing, but it feels very much in the vein. It feels like we all have friends that we haven't hung out with for a while, and then we come back to those friends like months, years later, and pick up right where you left off. That's what it feels like to me, and I was really impressed with it. I had to watch it by myself. My daughter is just not into X-Men. If they do it like a Spider-Man 98, I'm sure she would be more into it.
Yeah, we had
Mr. Sinister rules.
You just wait.
We had a little bit of baby mama drama that I did not expect, but I thought was an interesting storyline. Mm-hmm. So you and Jared, you guys are a lot more familiar with the comics. Me, as a pretty casual when it comes to the comics, but a hardcore fan when it comes to all the films and shows and things like that, the television media. I didn't know that much about Madeline Pryor. I think that it was cool to see that character fleshed out a bit, as well as Mr. Sinister, which we got a lot of Mr. Sinister from the original animated series. And by the way, this is really what I wanted to say in the intro. I have a love-hate relationship with X-Men, the animated series. Grew up as a kid. I wore that VHS tape out, Night of the Sentinels. I think it was part 1 or something like that. The episode where Beast is incarcerated. Magneto comes and tries to break him out. And then he puts the cuffs back on. He's like, no, we're not doing that. So as a kid, and then I had some of those action figures as well. I had the Iceman that you could put in the freezer and pull him out, and he was frozen. I thought that was so cool as a kid. But when I think about X-Men, the animated series now, I went back and watched every single episode, I think the first 2 or 3 seasons, to cover it on this channel. Had a notebook full of notes. I'm talking 2-3 pages. Sat down in front of a camera for a good 45 to an hour, spilling my guts and putting my love and emotion into it. And then when I finish, I get up and look at the camera. It was never cut on to begin with. So that is why this show, like I said, it doesn't have anything to do with the show itself, but it just triggers some negative emotions in me. Okay? I was really impressed with visually and from a story aspect. They really just did such a great job. And it's leagues better than the original show, which I have that love-hate relationship with.
Ooh, that show.
I was so mad after filming all that I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm not going back and sitting in front of a camera for another hour. I just threw my notes out. I was so mad.
You showed them.
I'll teach them.
I showed them.
Jared, you might have remembered this. Like, I remember very vividly, I have an X-Men, the original animated. I wasn't really watching this 97 series, and then Jonathan asked me to. And once I started, I couldn't stop. I just ran out of time. Like, I was at my in-laws' house today. So, like, I was watching X-Men while the kids were in the swimming pool. But there was a time, I don't know if you remember this, the Fox Kids block or whatever, on like a random Wednesday, I think it was, took over prime time. And you had, I think it was Night of the Sentinels, and then the next thing over, you had a Power Ranger episode.
Yes.
And it was like a big deal. I remember being like a kid being like, I'm watching Power Rangers and X-Men at like 7 o'clock at night. I've made it. This show, from what I've seen, collects that. So that's kind of like gets those feels. So that was kind of fun. Like I loved it.
X-Men season 3. It was the first parter of the Lady Deathstrike episode. And then after that, it was the next Power Rangers because they took Rita Repulsa out and Lord Zed appeared. So it was prime time television.
It's a big
the
deal,
ratings were
dude.
just through the roof. Like they were just out of control. I'm reading, where is it? I'm rereading. I've read it a few times previously on X-Men. Great book by the showrunners. And they said that when the numbers came in for X-Men, they beat ABC, NBC, and CBS numbers combined for one show, and it had never happened before. They just had no idea the hit that they had on their hands.
Which is really impressive, especially at that time, given that it was animated and a property that at that time was not very well known.
Right. They had Pride of the X-Men a few years earlier, and it was a huge bomb. And so that's why Kitty Pryde isn't in X-Men, is because they attributed so much of the failure to her being in Pride of the X-Men. So she was the only character banned. And the Brood.
The Brood is nuts. Like, I can't believe they thought about trying that. At the time of the original release, like, you were kind of in like this weird renaissance of good superhero cartoons. You have Spider-Man, you have X-Men, and you have Batman the Animated Series, and all were must-watch television.
Totally.
So I felt that again watching these episodes. Like I said, I can't give my full until I see it all, but 3 more episodes.
The original log line for X-Men 97 was going to be that Cyclops and Jean are pregnant and they're going to leave the team to Wolverine and Storm to run the show as they combat Mr. Sinister and figure out how to go on without Professor X. That is not what this show was. I went into it expecting Wolverine and Storm with the background characters of Rogue and Gambit leading this show while Cyclops and Jean head off to have Cable or Rachel. We don't know. And so each week I was just blown away because it was not at all what I was expecting. It was a new surprise, and they leave you hanging at the end of those 32 minutes. You just rewatch it again.
What about the new character, Roberto?
Sunspot.
So he was in Days of Future Past, the live action movie, for a brief little bit, which I thought that was a pretty cool character from what we saw of him in Days of Future Past. I think he was also in
New Mutants,
which was not a great movie.
I love New Mutants, personally.
The movie?
Yes.
Oh, Jason.
Listen, it's not the best Marvel movie ever made, but it's a horror movie, and I like horror movies.
I didn't hate it. You know, usually Jason and I would disagree on stuff like that, but I kind of agree. I didn't hate it.
I mean, it's not the best movie ever made, but like it's enjoyable. It's got aspects of horror that I really, really like. It kind of felt like its own standalone movie.
Was it true to the source material?
I mean, the Demon Bear stuff was pretty dark.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. But you don't like horror movies, John.
Well, I do like some horror movies, but they have to be character driven, like a Freddy Krueger or a Jason or, Michael Myers, something like that. I'm not big on the normal slasher, like, bleh.
For what it was, it opened up the door for, I hope, for us to get more like horror-based comic book characters. Like, that'd be great.
It probably didn't open that door, Jason.
No, it did, because it didn't make any money. But I liked it.
Cool.
Jared, why don't you tell us why you love the character Storm so much, and what did you think of her in this show?
Yeah, Storm has been my favorite character since I first saw this. I remember watching this when it debuted as a kid, seeing these commercials leading up. There's a show called X-Men, and I didn't even know who Spider-Man was, really. Watching it and seeing her in the mall, put her finger out and yell at this robot, and then she freaking shoots lightning out of her fingers. It hits her feet, and slowly her costume comes about, and she's got this huge cape. She jumps up in the air, throws lightning, and catches the kid. Like, who this? Who is this? The only superhero I knew was Tim Burton's Batman, and then I would watch the Batman from the 60s. So to see this chick, like, controlling I was in. So Storm was my girl since 1992. Number one, can't beat her. And then I saw the pictures for X-Men 92, and she was in her Jim Lee costume with a mohawk. And the mohawk is my least favorite Storm iteration of all the Storm costumes. I cannot stand punk Storm. And not only that, it was wrong. The wrong hairdo with the wrong costume. That doesn't make any sense. And then they didn't even explain it. She just shows up in episode 1 with her head shaved. What? So they explain it a little bit in the comic book. There's a prelude comic book between X-Men 92 and X-Men 97. It's 4 issues. And she went to a Dazzler concert in that comic book and was inspired. Like, no. Anyways, she had such a great arc through these 10 episodes. She starts out in the first episode and Cyclops says, give them the forecast. And my girl, she's like, I needed a dramatic. I mean, you notice in that first episode, she's not fighting with the other X-Men. She's half a mile away just waiting in the sand for Cyclops to say something. Like, she's that chick, you know?
She's a level 10 threat.
She's an Omega level threat. Yeah.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
Like, lightning, I'm going to need you to hit this sand, turn it into glass, and then we're going to do a hurricane. The other X-Men should have turned around and said, why did we even bother? You could have done it at the beginning. But it just established who she was, and then she sacrifices herself for Magneto in the second episode, which also shows more of her character. We see her leave the X-Men. Episode 3, they take her title card away during the intro. Dun-dun-dun-dun. No Storm. Like, what? The 10-year-old Jared is freaking out here. She's not in there. They don't even really reference her. And then at the end of the episode, she's in a bar in her punk costume, Jason, which you seem to enjoy, and meets Ford. Didn't see that coming. She loses her powers. They draw it out to a couple episodes. She has to battle the adversary, who turns out being partly a bad guy, but the other part is her own self. And then when she gets her powers back and she gets her like old school giant size original X-Men costume, oh my gosh, I like watched it over and over and over again that Wednesday morning. So good. Unfortunately, they dropped her for a couple episodes, so she didn't really show up there until the end there. But again, she comes in and saves the day and just shows them what's up. I thought it was a great arc for her. Loved it.
Does Dazzler show up in the last 3 episodes?
She died on Genosha, my friend.
That's less than ideal.
Yeah.
I'm a big Dazzler fan.
I love Dazzler.
Oh, I don't know what to think about that, but yeah.
Dazzler might be my favorite X-Men in the comics. It's light out of her hands. Like, what is not cool about that? And then she becomes president of the United States.
I don't know that much about the character. I think that we got a brief appearance in one of those terrible Fox X-Men films of a Dazzler, but there are rumors and rumblings. T. Swift is going to be the Dazzler in the MCU, or at least just in Deadpool.
I love it.
I'll take it.
I've recently started working out, and some songs from that Poet Society album have made my playlist. It's good.
Oh, you're talking Taylor Swift. I don't know the names of any of her albums, so I was kind of
that new one that came out.
I was thinking, like, is he talking about a band called the Dead Poet Society?
No, it's like Tortured Poet Society is one of her new album.
It's
not bad.
I think
it's not good, but it's not bad.
I think that might could work for me, though, if I started listening to Taylor Swift, if I ever did work out one day, which is still if I did listen to T Swift, that would probably make me angry enough to pump some iron.
John, you like all music. That's what you told me.
I do. I love Lady Gaga. I love metal. I love rock. I love country. But I don't like T Swift at all.
I mean, as a person, she's insufferable. But like, her music I've always liked. So.
And that doesn't really affect my opinion of her music. Like, I don't care what like when it comes to, unlike film, when it comes to music, I don't care what their political agenda. If I like the music, I like the music. But when it comes to T Swift, just not a fan. I don't. Her voice and the lyrics, and it's just a little too gay. Because I listen to some really gay stuff. Okay, like I listen to techno. I listen to Lady Gaga.
Oh God.
I listen to K-pop with my wife, but when it comes to T Swift, like that's crossing that line of being a little too gay.
Man, everyone's gay once in a while.
The conclusion for me was good enough, but it just wasn't overly satisfying to me. I wasn't big on Bastion, but once again, this is a character that I don't know that much about. I thought he was a decent villain, but not great. I personally prefer Mr. Sinister, even though he was kind of Bastion's lackey. I like the look of Mr. Sinister. When I was a kid, I had a Mr. Sinister action figure. I always thought he was a really cool looking character.
Hey, look, there's Mr. Sinister.
Yeah. I love that.
I do too.
Now, Magneto, at the end, that EMP pulse that was ruining the world, you really get a chance there at the end to see how much of a bad dude Magneto can be if he really wants to be. As much as Jared loves Storm, I love Magneto. That is probably, if not my all-time favorite villain, definitely in my top 3, easily.
And he did it in his underwear.
Which is even scarier.
There may be a cosplay coming, Jonathan, just so you know.
I'm all over it, if so. That's me, Comic-Con 2025.
You're going to have to start working out.
And Jared, I'm riding with you the whole way to Comic-Con dressed like that.
Oh, in the back. In the back seat. Speaking of Taylor Swift and gay.
And we're listening to T-Swift, too.
That's what I just said. Speaking of Taylor Swift and gay. Again, just speaking to Bo DeMaio, he knew he was such a fan. He threw these Easter eggs out to us. We're on Genosha, and he realizes, I don't have time to write an Archangel story, but I've got Archangel at the party, and I've got Morph change into Archangel in the first episode, and we get the Dazzler cameo. We get to see Exodus show up on Genosha. Morph transforms into Sabretooth and Psylocke. Colossus, the first time he's ever in his comic book costume. We never got to see him except for in a wife beater and jeans, and Morph turns into the red and yellow costume for us. It was wonderful. He pulled in new villains like Executioner, Adversary, Bastion, who are big names in the comics but never got their due in the original cartoon. And he gave them some gravitas while still giving us the love letter to characters like Sinister, Mojo, and Magneto, who were villains originally. I really think the worst part of the whole season was that it wasn't 20 episodes. I think that Marvel knew how much people loved X-Men, and that's why they gave it a green light for season 2 before they even finished season 1. They should have just went, for lack of a better term, balls to the wall, and just went for this huge, long season. Give me 10 more Wednesday mornings, because I'm like a crack addict going through withdrawal.
I will say that I thought that we were going to get a lot more wokeness from this show with Morph and everything else that kind of came out before the show released. But I was pleasantly surprised. I thought that Morph's character there was hints that he kind of had a crush, or he or she, whatever he identifies as, on Wolverine. But it wasn't overbearing. This was ultimately in a cartoon, but I don't think that this cartoon was aimed at kids. So I'm okay with it. What we got, I'm okay with. With all that being said, guys, if you had to rate this show on a scale from 0 to 10, 0 being awful, 10 being perfect, where would you put it?
So I'll give it a 9.5. Darn near close to perfect for me. I think this show showed that you could have an X-Men animated series without Wolverine being the number one guy.
Yes.
There are many episodes you didn't even realize Wolverine was there, and it still worked. We got to see Nightcrawler show up and do his thing. We got a spotlight more on Bishop. Cyclops definitely acted like the guy that I knew it was in Cyclops. I knew you could be like this, and he was like that. The girls got to step up and this was almost like the Cyclops and Rogue series with Storm guest starring the X-Men to me in many ways, and I'm totally here for it, and I'm okay with that. We got classic villains. We got new villains. We got animation that we could have only dreamed for in 1992 to 1997. We got grown-up stories, but also kids could watch. We got to see comic book stories like Fatal Attractions, E is for Extinction. We got to see so many, Operation Zero Tolerance, all of them in 10 episodes. Inferno, we got to see all of it. Like, even as I'm thinking of it, there's just so much that we got out of these 10 episodes. I think season 2 is going to have to, how is it going to beat it or even compare to it? So 9.5 for me.
Out of all the voice actors, which don't forget, most of these voice actors came back after being gone from the show for almost 30 years. Out of all the voice actors, we'll go around the table and then we'll end with me. But who did you guys think sounded the oldest?
Oh, I really don't know. I mean, as far as that goes, like something
You
that's
didn't
like,
notice the actors sounding old, any of them?
no, not really. I mean, I was just, watching it as it was. So I wasn't really looking for that, I guess. But
Jason, what do you think?
Gambit.
Well, Gambit's a new voice actor,
Oh,
Yeah.
is he?
but I would say Rogue. Lenore Zahn, she's aged a little bit.
See, I heard that a couple places on the interwebs. I didn't think that the Rogue actress, like even watching her behind the scenes, which I watched that the other night, she didn't even, I mean, she looks old, don't get me wrong, but she didn't even look that old. But her voice to me sounded very youthful. But Wolverine, it literally sounded like this is me hearing the guy on the trailer and then on the first couple episodes and further into the show as well. It literally sounded like someone that they had wheeled out of a nursing home.
Jeez, Dad. Keep buzzing in my ear. What would we do if we ever lost you?
Put in front of a microphone playing this part of Wolverine. Not all the time when he was talking, but probably about 40% of the time. But to me, it sounded bad. I mean, it sounded like Old Man River playing Wolverine. It was almost distracting to me.
I guess when you say that, that kind of pulls that for me too. It's like his voice was the one that I felt maybe the most off. It was noticeable. Maybe that is it. Maybe now that you've said that, that kind of falls in for me there, and I could say that as well.
There were some moments that it sounded like he had those things in his nose and then maybe even a catheter in.
Only the pain that a catheter can bring.
Chris Potter was the original voice of Gambit, and he's now the voice of Cable.
Yeah.
And
okay.
the original voice of Jean Grey is now the voice of Val Cooper.
Okay, cool.
And I assumed that it was the same Professor Charles Xavier, but it wasn't. It was Ross Marquand who played the gay guy in Walking Dead. And he played, well, what else can you say about the character? He was Aaron. And also he played Red Skull in Infinity War, I believe it was. He's an impressionist, and he's done some good work. I think he's also done a few voices on What If as well. Very cool.
Cal Dodd said that after the trailer came out, people were talking about his voice because he had that one line in the trailer when he's on the Blackbird, and he tweeted, he said, "That's not how I sound. I don't know what happened in mixing or whatever." So I don't know about that. Thankfully, he only had like 5 lines the whole season.
I will say that I really enjoyed the episode where not Cal Dodd, but Wolverine had to drive Jean Grey to the hospital. I thought that was a really fun episode. Anyway, guys, what do you think about it?
I'd probably give it a 9.
Okay.
I would. I mean, again, I loved it. I thought it was really great. I don't really know what else to say about it other than that. I mean, really, it brought back the life of characters who, like the live action movies, have just punted off to the side as true side characters, right? They're just side characters, and it brought that up another level for me again, and it made me really enjoy the franchise again. I think
they made X-Men great again. Jason, what do you think?
I'm gonna go, just for it not being complete, I'm gonna go 8. Really liked what I saw, but I'll be able to tell you probably by the end of tomorrow.
Okay, we'll make sure we put your actual rating there on the screen. What you think tomorrow, because this will not air probably for another week. I told you guys that I could not rank this compared to live action film, but I decided to clump it together with all Marvel and DC shows, as well as some of the shorts that have come out recently, like Werewolf by Night. I felt like that was a more appropriate place to put it with that being said, I gave it in this, it's number 12 on my list out of only 35 features. I have it at 6.5. I thought that it was good. It certainly didn't help that I had that love-hate relationship with the original show. That definitely biased, I'll admit. The story, and then also the Mojo episode didn't help. And like I said, I wasn't completely satisfied with the conclusion. I felt like we could have gotten just a little bit more closure. I know that maybe they're planning on doing a really quick turnaround with season 2. But once again, the conclusion and that Mojo episode really gave me that old school X-Men animated series vibes. I have it ranked right under Loki, which I clumped both seasons of Loki together and put it at a 7. It's my first 6.5 on the list. But to me, Loki season 1 and 2 combined are a little bit better than X-Men, the animated series. I know that Jared disagrees.
No, I've always thought your ratings were bub kiss anyway. So
yeah, well, maybe you can get some good sleep on that pillow tonight, Jared.
My guy, he's gone, but he'll be back in season 2 as a horseman of death.
I just hope that, whatever happens to all of us, I hope that we never sound as bad as Cal Dodd did in this season.
Cal, his views do not represent the views of Jeremy, Jason, and Jared.
That's right.
Anyway, thanks so much for joining us, guys. We really appreciate it. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Let us know in the comments who's right, who's wrong. What did you think about this show? Check out Jared and Jason on their socials, which you can find below their name right now. Check us out on our other socials. And until next time, have a good one.